Vivian was 71 years old and had a daughter who had quietly decided, without meaning to, that her mother's story was mostly told. It wasn't unkindness. Diane loved her mother, loved her with an attentive, worried love that sometimes tipped into something that left no room for Vivian to be anything other than fragile. She called every day to check she'd eaten. She arrived on weekends with containers of food and the expression of someone managing a situation. She spoke about her mother to friends in that careful tone people use for things that require handling. Vivian heard all of this and said little, not because she agreed, but because she had learned over the years that some things are better demonstrated than argued. She didn't want to fight to prove she was still alive inside. She knew Diane acted from love, even if it was a love that had grown too careful, the kind that surrounds rather than accompanies, and in doing so, quietly shrinks the space a person has to breathe. So Vivian smiled, accepted the containers, said she was fine. But something moved in her, quietly and persistently. Not resentment, a desire to be seen whole. She had been widowed at 66, 5 years ago, on an ordinary Wednesday that had divided her life into before and after, the way only large losses do. The first year had been hard, not in the dramatic way people sometimes imagine, hard in the quiet way, the grief that doesn't announce itself and arrives instead in unexpected moments. A cup set for two out of habit, a program on the television he would have commented on, the particular silence of late afternoon that used to have company and no longer did. But Vivian had come through, not because she was strong in the way people use that word as a compliment, because she had discovered, inside the pain, that there were still things in her that wanted to continue, curiosities unsatisfied, desires unrealized, a kind of interior life that loss had shaken but not extinguished. In the first months, many people spoke to her as though widowhood were the final chapter. They said she should rest now, take it easy, not take on too much. They meant well, but they spoke as though her future had contracted. Vivian listened and thought that people sometimes confused age with conclusion. She missed her husband. She felt tired sometimes. She felt his absence in the way that grief lodges itself in objects. But she also felt the desire to walk, to learn, to look in shop windows, to find new streets in her own town, to try a different flavor of something, to do things without having to explain why. There was a part of her that still asked questions, and those who still ask questions have not finished. It happened on an afternoon in April. Vivian had been walking, something she did every afternoon, a way of being in the world without having to talk to anyone, when she stopped in front of a small art center near the high street. There was a notice in the window. Watercolor for beginners, all ages welcome. She stood and read it again. All ages welcome. There was something in those 3 words that reached her in a way she hadn't expected. Not the version of her the world saw, not the widow of 71 who needed containers of food. The part of her that still had curiosity, that still wanted to learn, that still had a spring inside, even when winter was what showed on the surface. She stood at the window for a few minutes. Inside, she could see a table with paper, brushes, small pots of color, a jar of water gone cloudy with pigment. It seemed both simple and impossible. When she was a girl, she had liked to draw in the margins of notebooks. Her teacher had said she had a light hand. Then life had filled up. Marriage, children, years of work, her husband's illness, grief. And certain desires had been folded away into internal drawers that nobody opened. She went in and enrolled before she had time to persuade herself it was impractical. She left holding a list of materials and feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: anticipation. She didn't tell Diane immediately. She knew what her daughter would say, not cruelly, but with that particular concern that disguises itself as practical reason. Are you sure that's sensible? Is the journey too much? What if... Vivian wanted to have the experience before she had to defend it. So she went alone on a Thursday morning, took the bus she knew well, climbed 2 flights of stairs with the care of someone who knows her own limits without needing anyone to manage them for her, and entered a room where other people sat with brushes in hand and blank paper before them. The teacher was young, early 30s, direct, without the particular condescension that sometimes arrives alongside good intentions toward older students. Vivian appreciated that immediately. "There's no right or wrong in watercolor," the teacher said at the start. "The water goes where it wants to go. You learn to work with it, not against it." Vivian looked at the blank paper in front of her and thought that was true of other things too. She sat beside a young woman of about 20 who seemed nervous, and a man with white hair who had been given the class as a birthday gift from his granddaughter. Nobody in the room seemed entirely certain what they were doing. That reassured her. For the first time in a long while, she was somewhere she didn't have to be a mother, a widow, a grandmother, a potential patient, or someone else's responsibility. She was simply a beginner, and there was enormous freedom in that. The first watercolor was not good. Not bad in the sense of having made a technical error, bad in the sense that it bore little resemblance to what she had imagined it would be. The colors had bled into places she hadn't intended. The shapes had lost the definition she had tried to hold. But there was something in those colors that had not obeyed, that she found unexpectedly beautiful, as though the paper had captured not what she had tried to do, but what had actually happened. And what had actually happened was more honest than what she had planned. She carried it home carefully, the way you carry news. She put it on the kitchen table and looked at it while the kettle boiled. It was simple, awkward, almost childlike, and yet there was a small joy hidden in those colors, a joy that didn't ask permission. She went back the following week, and the week after. After a month, she bought better brushes. She began to notice color in things she passed every day: the green of leaves after rain, the tired yellow of old walls, the particular blue the sky holds just before dark. The town, which had seemed repetitive for years, began to show her new details. Or perhaps the details had always been there, and she had simply come back to looking. Diane found out by accident. She saw the painting materials on the table during a Saturday visit and looked at them with an expression Vivian knew well. "Mom, are you doing a painting class?" "Watercolor," Vivian corrected, "every Thursday." "On your own?" "With other students and a teacher, yes." Diane was quiet for a moment. Vivian waited for the practical concern she knew was coming. But Diane said something different from what she expected. "Can I see?" Vivian went to the other room and returned with the watercolors, 6 of them so far, each one different, each one more confident than the last, but all still with that quality of something alive that hadn't been entirely controlled. Diane looked at each one. She spent longer on each than Vivian had expected. "Mom," she said finally, "these are beautiful." Vivian looked at her daughter. Something was different in Diane's expression, not the usual concern, a kind of surprise. And inside the surprise, something that looked like recognition, as though she were seeing her mother in a way she hadn't seen her before. "You never told me you liked art," said Diane, "You never asked," said Vivian, without accusation, simply as a fact. The sentence sat between them for a moment. Diane looked down at the paintings. She understood, with a small sting of discomfort, that in recent years she had asked her mother many things, whether she'd taken her tablets, whether she'd locked the door, whether she'd eaten, whether she needed a lift, whether she was in any pain. But it had been a long time since she had asked what her mother wanted, what she still hoped for, what made her want to get up in the morning. "I should have asked," she said quietly. Vivian touched the edge of one of the papers. "Perhaps you're asking now." Something changed between them after that Saturday. Not immediately and not perfectly. Diane still called with too much worry, still arrived with food, still said "be careful" more times than Vivian considered necessary. But she began to correct herself from the inside. When she was about to ask only about medications and meals, she tried to ask about the class, too. When she thought about saying her mother shouldn't go out alone, she remembered the paintings on the wall and swallowed the words. When she watched Vivian choosing a color, she saw a person making decisions, experimenting, getting things wrong, learning. And Vivian, in turn, began to share a little more. She talked about the teacher, about the young woman who laughed when the paint escaped, about the man who always painted boats though he lived far from the sea, about the difficulty of controlling water and the strange relief of not controlling everything. Diane listened, sometimes moved, sometimes uncomfortable with the realization of how much she had reduced her mother to a function, being cared for. But love can learn, and when it learns, it can expand. Vivian still goes on Thursdays. The watercolors have begun to appear on the walls of her sitting room. Not all of them, not arranged like a gallery, but a few, chosen by criteria only she fully understands. Diane started arriving on Saturdays a little earlier. Sometimes she sits at the kitchen table while her mother paints. Not every Saturday, not as an established routine, but when it happens, it has a different quality, like two people beginning to know each other in a more truthful way than they did before. One afternoon, Diane brought flowers, not as a gift for a fragile elderly woman, but as something to paint. She put them in a simple vase and asked, "Do you think you could paint these?" Vivian smiled. "I could try." And that word, try, seemed to open something new in the room. Vivian is 71 years old and has a spring inside that nobody had thought to ask about. It was there all along, simply waiting, the way springs wait, for the right conditions to appear. And when it appeared, it didn't come as a performance. It came as color dissolved in water, as a Thursday morning, as a blank page accepting imperfect marks, as a woman discovering she could still begin something without apologizing for her age. Because some people bloom early, and some people bloom after many winters. But blooming late is not blooming less. Sometimes it is blooming with more roots, more history, more silence, more truth. This space was made with care, and there is a place here reserved for you.